It is really a pleasure to be here at the first edition of EDGE and share this stage with all of you. And thanks for the curatorial team to create such a great event about EDGE, on the edge, and about peripheries. Today I'm also going to talk about some kind of peripheries, the wild places and wild men, and want to show you how these are connected to some kind of architectural practices. Okay. But first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Péter Hámori, an architect and urban designer, co-founder of GUBAHA MORI, which is an urban design studio with architectural design. And well, 10 years ago, it was our original idea to how to become rich, designing buildings, architectural objects, but it didn't really happen until today. And for sure not with all these curatorial projects that we started doing in the past years. But on the other hand, we are really happy to be able to explore the Hungarian under 40 generations works and the challenges of the next 50 years as curators in a series of exhibitions. Well, we unfortunately won't be here tomorrow when some of you might have an architecture tour in Budapest, but that upper right building, the electrical substation, is some 100 meters far away. So if you find us today, we're really happy to show you the project. Okay, 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, we started feeling that the work that we do, like designing buildings and the world that we live in, don't really respond to each other. And so since then, we also do critical and speculative design that focuses on how architecture can relate to planetary scale phenomena and the polycrisis condition that we live in. I will come back to this first project, the Kesthely model, later in the presentation. I took this photo last spring in my home village at a random place outside of the settlement. This place is 30-some kilometers far away from Edge Festival on the south from Budapest. It's not part of the metropolitan area, not part of the suburb. What we can see is the spot where agricultural land, where people grow potatoes and cabbages here, meet forestry. Natural landscape, we could say. It has many plants in it. Some animals and fungi may lurk in the woods in the background, and not a single building on site. But there's also another view to it. First thing, that this is not a forest. This is an industrial pop-roll plantation that was planted after the river regulations to fix the wind-driven sand mass movement. Its main function is to create materials for paper industry and carpentry. Since this plantation will be completely cut down in the next 60 years, it has no chance at all to become a forest with an autonomously working biodiversity. That would need 200 years or 300 years. If we go further and have a look at the land, we will see that the soil is heavily modified with pesticides, fertilizers, that is no longer a healthy structure. It is also a monocultural industrial plantation, land that's main purpose is to provide space for capital accumulation through vegetable growth. It is part of the CEE region capitalist food supply system, while also part of the global chemical industry to be able to maximize the agricultural production benefits. If we look at the sky, we can basically see nothing out of the ordinary, but this is the sky that connects this place to our planetary climatic networks. This is where the heat waves and the dry weather come from. And 100 kilometers far away, up where the outer space starts, thousands of space technology artifacts, satellite networks, and technological debris floating around the Earth. All these images, all these regional, continental, planetary networks are human-made. We control everything from the North Pole to the south, from the bottom of the ocean to the ecosystems of high mountains. We do that to create a planetary city that provides security, protection, and comfort. On the other hand, this total control, this total design process has something to do with the polycrisis condition that we face today. The question is, are there still places that are not controlled? Is there a strategy that somehow we could mitigate this total control? Well, the answer is yes. Almost 3% of the total surface area on this planet is considered untouched ecosystems. It's not really much. And yes, ecologists and nature conservationists have a strategy called rewilding that could change nature-human relations and turn more regions into wilderness areas, natural parks where human presence could be brought down close to zero. Rewilding somehow says that by healing the biosphere, our planetary future scenarios would also change in a positive direction. Well, I don't believe that because what we face now is not an ecological crisis. It's not a climatic crisis either. It is a civilization crisis that has ecological and climatic symptoms. It has societal, economic, and political crisis symptoms as well. But confronting the modernist notion of total design with wildness seems a promising direction, so let's have a look at it. What does wildness have to do with our civilization? In the following few slides, I will rely on Richard Bernheimer and historian Hayden White's research on wildness. What he claims in his paper, The Forms of Wildness, Archaeology of an Idea, is that the place of exclusion, that is wildness, and the figure of exclusion, the wild man or wild women, have been the conceptual antithesis of our civilization in the last 3,000 years, and the notion of wildness changed at every crisis that happened since then. What I want to show is that by building an unworlding and design for decline practices, wildness can be not the antithesis, but the positive definition of a possible future civilization. Not a negative value anymore, but the architecture of decline. I will pick 6 figures, 6 wild men or women from different periods of history to show how the notion of wildness evolved through time. With Minotaur being the first one, we are going back to ancient European civilizations, where being wild meant to be hostile, violent, and chaotic. Wildness was out in the chaotic deep forest, the untamed environment, any impenetrable spatial structure. Hence the labyrinth where the Minotaur was put in. That was not a human structure, but it was a structure that was built for a wild man. Thus, the labyrinth itself is an impenetrable spatial structure, one of the first urban metaphors for wildness. After the Roman Empire collapsed and Christianity became a state power, it radically transformed European civilization. St. Augustine, in his work Confessions, used heresy, guilt, madness, and damnation to reinforce the positive values of Christian worldview. Here, wildness is not just a place, but also a moral condition at the same time. And these two are intertwined to emphasize the express God's curse. This is what we can see in the case of Ishmael, who was exiled to the desert, to the emptiness. The deprivation of the blessing is always accompanied by a place, so the moral state and the place are inseparable, and the place of the curse is part of the wildness. Later in the Middle Ages, from the 12th century onwards, when medieval culture and social order started disintegrating, the wild man started becoming a symbol of envy and admiration. It is still a person with animality and high level of sexual desires, but also the master of peasant wisdom and the symbol of free humanity. The medieval wild man is free of any societal institutional network, lives in the neighboring forests, and appears regularly in the life of urbanites. This envy and admiration is something that we will see more clearly in the modernist notion of wilderness. After the European colonization of the Americas, the frontier movement and the natural park movements, modernity's fundamental notion of wildness has become the sublime, the exotic, the paradise, the remote place, the desired and adored faraway place, high mountains, jungles, colonies. There are tons of examples here. We can mention Caspar David Friedrich's paintings or Henry David Thoreau's Walden. But I'm bringing the wild men of Borneo as an example here for a reason. These two brothers were born in the USA with extremely short bodies, mentally disabled. And a freak show circus producer guy, who is in the middle, took them out of their family to create new identities for them. That they were born in Borneo, and he rescued them from a battle. He earned huge amount of money showing them around the country in a traveling circus in a freak show. This exploitation of human lives could be seen as parallel to what happened to natural environments as well. With the technological acceleration after the Industrial Revolution, exploiting nature, its resources, its ecosystems started to kick in. The further we went in this process, the less wilderness areas remained intact. As one after another of these wildernesses was brought under control, the idea of the wild man was progressively despatialized. Since modern psychotherapy started evolving, wildness and wild men were no longer outer spaces or figures, but the places of psychosis and madness, and which could be found in every one of us. It was the id from Freud, the savage from Levi-Strauss, showed that technological civilization has overcome the lost child or savagery within us, but it would be a matter of societal good to be able to bring it unleashed. Cleanness and hygiene and modernity are walking hand in hand, creating the new modern man, the modern city and the modern building, and everything that is outside of it has become wildness. And we have arrived at our days, and the last and ultimate wild figure is the trans body. It is the trans body that fundamentally challenges the patriarchy. The body has become the wildness, the body that is a holobiont, symbiotic, ever-changing, non-sterile organism, the place of identities, modification, microbiome, bacteria, and fungi. So what is wildness and what it is in the light of a possible future civilization values, positive values, after we have all seen all of these negative values? Well, wildness is definitely not wilderness, because wilderness is the notion of the Age of Enlightenment. It was conceptualized when nature and human were separated into Cartesian categories. It is always the other and the uncivilized. Wilderness served as a basis for the American frontier movement and fundamentally fueled patriarchism. It was the basis for the national park movement that ended up destroying indigenous peoples and cultures through the logics of capitalist colonialism and racialization. Wilderness, with concepts like half Earth, carries the idea that by healing nature we could overcome our difficulties in the polycrisis, but this is just like buying indulgences. We need to find a positive definition of wildness. If you prefer, we need to find the antithesis of wilderness. So what it is, I think wildness is a plural structure that is radically stable. Wildness is always a community, a holobiont, uncontrollable set of entities. Wildness is critical, is political and transcolor. Wildness is a decomposer that builds and decays simultaneously in the battle of agencies. Wildness is messy, unpredictable, rough, and wildness is terrible beauty. Wildness is not an object but network-oriented, and it extends time to an ecological or geological scale. Wildness is the act of unbuilding. It is the act of unworlding, as Jack Halberstam says in his queer and trans theories. He says that in order to create a new world, a utopia, we first must unmake the world that we're currently living in. We need to let dominant system and oppression structures down and understand that what we are in is the time of transition, the decline itself. So let's talk about architecture. The case studies that I work with are projects that are at some point introduce wildness into the field that we're working at. Adventure playgrounds, free children from the social constraints in the city and work with the aesthetics of collapse. Agnes Dénes, in her environmental art pieces, come from dominant systems, working with architecture and urbanism tools, such as space, land use, inviting other species in her field of works. Andres Hake, Tak Mio Tsunemaya, and Fuminori Nosaku are together now the faces of modern human architecture, or as Beatrice Colomina and Mark Wigley uses the term, trans-species architecture. This is not ecological architecture or any new type of sustainable architecture. These buildings, spaces, or spatial concepts address issues related to the operational logic of civilization. Extractivism, racialization, capital accumulation, material resources and biodiversity loss, and transcolority. In the last few minutes, I would like to talk about a bit in details of the last two projects in the slides, szabadonbalaton and GUBAHA MORI. szabadonbalaton is a platform for anthropologists, ecologists, water management experts, visual artists, and scientific researchers that work with the changing socio-ecological system of Lake Balaton. We, GUBAHA MORI, joined forces with them some years ago, and last year the European LINA program selected the Lake in Transition project as one of the 25 LINA Fellows projects. This is Lake Balaton, the biggest freshwater lake in Central Eastern European region. The lake that is undergoing massive transition because of over-tourism and massive urbanization. The lake is an extremely complex ecosystem of many non-human stakeholders, but in the last century, humans took over control and turned it into a massively managed landscape. szabadonbalaton creates research programs, cultural happenings, and artistic interventions using the latest scientific results to raise awareness of the massively degraded but not yet broken ecosystem of the waterfront zone. One of the wildest projects of theirs was the reintroduction of domestic animals in the waterfront zone that were banned from approaching the shore several decades ago. The beach pastures project is about inviting a new agent in a physical space that creates unpredictability, playfulness, and a different non-human interaction system. It changes the human perception of physical spaces, changes local politics and the water management system in the surrounding 10 or 20 kilometer zone. The Lake in Transition project's main goal is to recreate the waterfront transitional zone out of this line that we created in the past 100 years to ecotone and thus introduce wildness to the area that previously was identified as periphery and use that periphery as a positive value for the new situation. This is one of our competition proposals 5 years ago, where the task was to give a proposal for a beach rehabilitation project. This is the existing situation here, and that's the proposal that we did. We refused to add an extra 4,000 square meter of wellness function to a waterfront area that is supposed to function as an ecotone, 100 or 200 meter deep transitional area that distinguishes all the stress factors that come from both the water and the land side. We introduced several aspects of wildness here, radically reducing human presence in the shore zone, to create a new beach typology, presenting an integrative socio-ecological development model in opposition to the now existing capitalist growth-oriented models. So this project it's not a rewilding project. It introduces wildness into the area to unbuild hegemonic and oppressive systems related to the lake. This was to create a structural chaos that restabilizes waterfront ecosystems, and we wanted to, by this proposal, change development culture, change policy-making processes, and change the view that the waterfront is the zone for capital accumulation. It also was a purpose to create a zone that is equally accessible for humans and non-human species or other organic materials, and to recreate an ecosystem that was once a periphery of human civilization. In summary, I was showing that wildness and wild man were the permanent civilization antithesis in the past 3,000 years, having its societal concept changed from one crisis to the other. It was the hostile and chaotic place in the ancient cultures, the place and moral condition of damnation during Christian times, animality and sexual desire in medieval ages, the place for longing and sublime in the 19th century, the psychosis and madness in the early 20th century, and the changing body, the transmutation today. In a state of polycrisis, we will not be able to put the world back together. The only thing that we can do is to let it disintegrate. The architecture of this decline lies in wildness and in the once negative value, the periphery, that we can turn into a positive definition of the possible decaying future. Thank you very much.